March 1945 represented the culmination of months of exhaustive planning and preparation for the Allies as they prepared to cross the Rhine River, a natural defensive barrier that had long symbolized the heart of Germany itself. The Rhine, wide, swift, and heavily fortified, had served as a strategic bulwark for German forces, and its banks were lined with trenches, minefields, barbed wire, and artillery emplacements. Allied Command, under General Dwight D. Eisenhower as Supreme Allied Commander, recognized that crossing this river was not merely a tactical necessity, but a psychological milestone that would signal the beginning of the end of Nazi Germany. The U.S. First and Third Armies, led by Generals Courtney Hodges and George S. Patton respectively, coordinated with Montgomery's British and Canadian forces in a meticulously timed series of operations along multiple points of the Rhine. On March 7, 1945, the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen unexpectedly remained intact after German forces attempted to demolish it, creating an unprecedented opportunity. Colonel Leonard Schroeder, Lieutenant Carl Timmerman, and the soldiers of the U.S. 9th Armored Division rushed to secure the bridge, navigating explosions, collapsing structures, and enemy fire in a harrowing advance that will be remembered as both miraculous and terrifying in the annals of military history. The crossing at Remagen demonstrated the essence of Allied audacity and rapid response. Under Patton's overarching operational influence, engineers, infantry, and armor units moved in perfect coordination to seize and stabilize the bridge. Sherman tanks rumbled across the structure as infantry followed closely behind, while combat engineers worked under fire to reinforce weakened sections and clear debris. Soldiers later recounted the terrifying creaking and groaning of the bridge as the weight of men, vehicles, and artillery pressed down, and yet there was no hesitation in their advance. Patton, even though not physically present at Remagen, maintained constant oversight via radio communication, issuing terse and urgent instructions to ensure momentum. Hold the line, push forward, take the bridge before it becomes rubble. Victory favors the audacious, not the cautious. This event marked a significant turning point, demonstrating that initiative and speed could turn what seemed like disaster into a decisive operational advantage. German forces, commanded locally by General von Zongen and reinforced by elements of the 15th and 116th Panzer Divisions, were stunned by the bridge's survival. Explosives intended to destroy the crossing had been incorrectly placed or failed entirely due to the chaos of retreat and poor coordination. Lieutenant Karl-Heinz Keitel, a German officer at the scene, later described confusion. The Americans surged across before we could respond coherently. Our demolitions failed, and our formations descended into disorder. The psychological impact on German troops was immediate. Panic replaced offensive confidence, and the element of surprise compounded the Allies' advantage. This unexpected opportunity demonstrated how meticulous preparation, combined with adaptability and audacity, could exploit enemy errors on a massive scale. As American troops pressed eastward, engineers labored tirelessly to stabilize the Ludendorff Bridge for sustained operations. Colonel John E. Baker led teams in installing reinforcements, while infantry units secured the surrounding banks, navigating minefields and booby-trap positions under heavy artillery fire. The risk was immense. Each crossing threatened to collapse the bridge, and yet the engineers' expertise, discipline, and courage ensured that tanks and heavy equipment could continue to flow across. Soldiers described the scene as surreal, artillery fire exploding nearby, smoke drifting over the river, and the relentless hum of engines echoing over the water. The operation was as much a test of human resilience and ingenuity as of tactical planning, illustrating the indispensable role of engineering in modern warfare. In conjunction with the Remagen crossing, the British Second Army under Montgomery prepared for Operation Plunder near Wesel, launching on March 23, 1945. This operation involved thousands of troops, hundreds of tanks, pontoon bridges, and extensive artillery bombardments designed to suppress German defenses and create safe crossings. Nighttime advances and deception tactics were employed to mislead German intelligence about the exact locations and timings of assaults. Lieutenant General Brian Horrocks, Montgomery's deputy, later recounted, "We orchestrated a symphony of war, every movement synchronized, every bombardment timed, every crossing rehearsed to near perfection. The combination of coordination, deception, and audacity underscored the complexity and precision required to cross a fortified river under enemy fire. Patton's Third Army approached Rhine crossings near Cologne with characteristic aggressiveness. His reconnaissance units identified weak points in German defenses, and armored spearheads advanced at unprecedented speeds. Sherman tanks, half-tracks, and mechanized infantry maneuvered in tandem, while artillery provided suppressive fire along fortified positions. Soldiers on the ground described the experience as a mixture of exhilaration and terror, crossing into enemy territory with both anticipation and fear, knowing that any misstep could result in death or capture. Patton's insistence on maintaining pressure, combined with his psychological understanding of both his troops and the enemy, created a momentum that left German forces scrambling and disoriented. Air support played a decisive role during the crossings. Fighter bombers from the U.S. 9th Air Force and the RAF flew continuous sorties to destroy artillery, disrupt supply lines, and provide close support to advancing ground units. B-17 bombers executed precision strikes on bridges and defensive fortifications, while P-51 Mustangs strafed retreating German columns. The coordination between ground and air forces was crucial. Radio communication between forward observers and pilots ensured that each strike supported the advance without friendly fire incidents. Soldiers noted the almost theatrical intensity of the battles. The sky was filled with explosions and smoke, the river churned with motion, and yet every man moved as if part of a single organism, directed by some unseen hand. Infantry units faced relentless obstacles. Minefields, barbed wire, and hidden machine gun positions challenged their every step. Engineers cleared paths under constant threat, often at the cost of life. Each successful movement across the Rhine required not only courage, but discipline, teamwork, and trust in leadership. Private John McAllister, a soldier in the 9th Armored Division, later reflected, "Every step was a choice between fear and duty. Yet our commander, our general, had shown us a path. We followed, knowing that hesitation meant death." The crossings were also a test of logistics. Maintaining a steady flow of men, ammunition, vehicles, and supplies across the river was critical to sustaining momentum. Patton and his staff coordinated meticulously with Eisenhower's Supreme Headquarters to ensure that bridgeheads were reinforced immediately and that armored and infantry units could exploit openings. Field reports emphasized that without efficient logistics, the entire operation could have collapsed, demonstrating that modern warfare demanded both strategic vision and operational execution. German resistance fragmented rapidly as multiple bridgeheads were established along the Rhine. By mid-March, American forces had created continuous lines on the eastern bank, allowing armored divisions to advance swiftly into the Ruhr industrial heartland. The psychological effect on German commanders was profound. Intercepted communications revealed desperation, confusion, and dismay at the Allies' speed. Panzer units were rendered ineffective, not just by firepower, but by operational tempo and the surprise of rapid crossings. Patton's combination of audacity, strategic insight, and relentless pursuit became a textbook example of operational art. Reconnaissance and intelligence gathering were pivotal. Scouts, informants, and local resistance provided actionable information that informed tactical decisions in real time. Patton's headquarters meticulously analyzed this intelligence to anticipate counterattacks, identify weak points, and maintain pressure. Field dispatches noted that the success of crossings depended not just on firepower, but on understanding enemy movements, terrain, and morale, highlighting the complex human dimension of war. By late March, the crossings had succeeded at multiple points along the Rhine. The U.S., 1st and 3rd Armies, supported by British and Canadian units, consolidated their positions, creating an uninterrupted front on the eastern bank. Tanks, artillery, and infantry moved into Germany at unprecedented speed, liberating towns and engaging retreating forces. The success of these operations was a testament to meticulous planning, audacious leadership, and disciplined execution. Reports from soldiers describe a mix of elation and exhaustion, the sense of witnessing history in motion as German resistance crumbled. The human cost of these crossings was immense, yet morale remained high due to the leadership of commanders like Patton. Soldiers wrote home describing both fear and exhilaration, the exhaustion of combat mitigated by the confidence instilled by effective leadership. German prisoners, meanwhile, were impressed by the organization, speed, and audacity of Allied forces. Patton's presence, operational brilliance, and unrelenting energy left a profound imprint on both sides of the conflict. The Rhine crossings were more than a tactical operation. They were a culmination of intelligence, engineering, coordination, leadership, and courage. Every decision, from bridge placement to timing of artillery barges, exemplified lessons learned across 4 years of grueling warfare. They represented not just the crossing of a river, but the symbolic penetration of the heart of the Third Reich, signaling the inexorable collapse of German resistance and the nearing end of the war in Europe. Finally, the audience is left to reflect on the human dimensions of these operations. How did ordinary soldiers maintain courage under the deadly pressures of river crossings? How did leadership, coordination, and audacity combine to overcome one of the most formidable natural and man-made defenses of the war? What lessons can be drawn about preparation, improvisation, and human resilience? These questions invite engagement, discussion, and a deeper appreciation for the immense complexity and heroism of the Allied advance across the Rhine. The days following the initial Rhine crossings in March 1945 marked a dramatic acceleration of the Allied advance, transforming what had once been a carefully planned operation into a relentless flood of men, machines, and momentum pouring into the heart of Germany. With bridgeheads secured at Remagen, Wesel, Oppenheim, and Cologne, Eisenhower issued clear instructions: exploit the crossings immediately and deny the German command any chance to stabilize a new defensive line. Patton's Third Army, true to its reputation, moved with almost shocking speed. On March 22, 1945, Patton famously crossed the Rhine at Oppenheim using assault boats and pontoon bridges, reportedly remarking with a mix of pride and irreverence, "I crossed the Rhine before Monty," a statement that captured both his competitiveness and his understanding of symbolic victory. This crossing was not ceremonial. It was executed under threat of artillery fire, with engineers working through the night and infantry holding fragile positions until armor could be brought across. German resistance east of the Rhine was increasingly fragmented, yet still deadly. Units of the Wehrmacht, Volkssturm militias, and remnants of elite formations attempted to delay the Allied advance, using hastily assembled defenses. Towns like Frankfurt, Darmstadt, and Kassel became scenes of fierce, chaotic fighting. Civilians, trapped between collapsing Nazi authority and advancing Allied columns, often hid in basements as shells struck streets and buildings crumbled. American soldiers reported encountering young boys and elderly men pressed into service, armed with outdated rifles or Panzerfaust, a grim reminder of how desperate Germany's situation had become. Patton observed grimly in his diary on March 26, "The enemy now fights with ghosts and children. This is not courage, it is tragedy." Logistics rapidly became both a triumph and a challenge. The speed of the advance threatened to outpace supply lines, forcing Allied planners to adapt on the move. Engineers constructed additional pontoon bridges, repaired railways, and reopened roads damaged by retreating German forces. The Red Ball Express, already legendary, pushed forward relentlessly, delivering fuel, ammunition, and food to units racing eastward. Patton's staff worked continuously to prevent bottlenecks, knowing that a pause could allow German forces to regroup. Officers recalled Patton's constant refrain: "A stalled army is a defeated army." His obsession with movement was not recklessness. It was a calculated understanding that speed was now the Allies' greatest weapon. Meanwhile, Montgomery's forces in the north expanded their bridgeheads with methodical precision. British and Canadian units advanced toward the Ruhr, Germany's industrial core, capturing factories, rail hubs, and supply depots. Operation Plunder and the accompanying airborne Operation Varsity, launched on March 24th, saw thousands of paratroopers dropped east of the Rhine to secure key terrain. Soldiers of the British 6th Airborne and U.S. 17th Airborne Divisions landed under intense fire, many killed or wounded before even reaching the ground. Yet their sacrifice paid off. German counterattacks were blunted, and vital road junctions were secured, allowing armored units to surge forward without delay. Air superiority proved absolute during this phase of the campaign. Allied aircraft roamed German skies almost unchallenged, attacking troop movements, supply columns, and communications nodes. Pilots described long columns of German soldiers surrendering en masse, waving white cloths or simply standing by roadsides, exhausted and defeated. The Luftwaffe, once feared across Europe, was now nearly absent. This dominance allowed Allied ground forces to maneuver freely, reinforcing the sense among soldiers that the war's end was approaching, even as fighting remained brutal and unpredictable. Patton's Third Army advanced through central Germany with astonishing speed, capturing cities such as Frankfurt by March 29th. In many cases, resistance collapsed after brief engagements, but elsewhere German units fought fiercely from fortified buildings and wooded hills. Infantrymen described urban combat that was close, terrifying, and exhausting, room-to-room fighting, sniper fire from church towers, and the constant threat of ambush. Patton demanded aggressive tactics, insisting that hesitation only prolonged bloodshed. "Drive them until they break," he told his corps commanders, because a broken enemy cannot regroup. As Allied forces pushed deeper, the psychological collapse of German command became increasingly evident. Communications intercepted by Allied intelligence revealed chaos at every level, from division headquarters to Hitler's inner circle. Orders contradicted one another, units were redeployed only to vanish, and commanders were replaced or executed for failure. Field Marshal Walter Model, tasked with defending the Ruhr, struggled to coordinate shattered forces under relentless pressure. A German staff officer later recalled, "We were fighting not an enemy army, but inevitability." The Rhine crossing had broken not just a defensive line, but the illusion that Germany could still control the war's outcome. The human experience of the advance was complex and emotionally charged. American soldiers encountered civilians who were fearful, hostile, relieved, or simply numb. Some towns surrendered without resistance, while others fought bitterly until overwhelmed. Soldiers wrote home describing the strange silence that followed battles, broken only by the sound of refugees moving westward and the distant rumble of artillery. Medics worked without pause, treating wounded civilians and soldiers alike, while chaplains attempted to provide comfort in a landscape of devastation. War, even in victory, carried a heavy moral weight. Coordination between Allied armies became increasingly critical as fronts widened and objectives multiplied. Eisenhower emphasized cooperation over rivalry, ensuring that Patton's rapid advances did not outpace Montgomery's northern push or Bradley's First Army operations. Despite personal rivalries, the Allied command structure held, allowing units to support one another when resistance stiffened. This unity, forged through years of hard lessons, stood in stark contrast to the fractured German command, underscoring the importance of leadership cohesion in modern warfare. Intelligence officers reported growing numbers of German units surrendering en masse, often without firing a shot. Entire battalions laid down their arms, exhausted, underfed, and disillusioned. Patton remarked to his staff that the enemy now fought with despair rather than hope. Yet he warned against complacency, reminding commanders that desperate enemies could still inflict deadly blows. This tension between triumph and caution defined the Allied mindset as they pressed toward the Elbe. The rapid collapse of German defenses east of the Rhine reshaped Allied strategic priorities. With the Ruhr encircled and central Germany exposed, attention turned toward preventing Soviet forces from advancing too far west. Political considerations now intertwined with military operations, adding another layer of urgency to the advance. Patton, outspoken as ever, privately expressed frustration with perceived restrictions, writing that the war could be ended even faster if momentum were fully exploited. His views, though controversial, reflected the intensity of the moment and the belief that history was accelerating toward a decisive conclusion. For the soldiers on the ground, the Rhine crossing and subsequent advance represented a profound shift. The fear that had accompanied earlier campaigns was now mixed with a sense of destiny, the feeling that they were witnessing the collapse of a regime that had terrorized Europe. Yet exhaustion was everywhere. Men slept in foxholes, abandoned houses, or simply beside their vehicles, waking to continue the advance at dawn. The war was not over, but its shape had changed irrevocably. By the end of March 1945, the Rhine no longer stood as a barrier, but as a line already fading into the past. Allied forces had transformed a carefully planned crossing into a cascading advance that shattered German defenses across a broad front. The success of this phase of the campaign demonstrated the full maturation of Allied warfare, integrated, relentless, and adaptive. It was clear to soldiers and commanders alike that Germany's defeat was no longer a matter of if, but when. As April 1945 began, the Allied armies east of the Rhine moved with a sense of irreversible momentum, yet the violence and complexity of the campaign did not diminish. The crossing of the Rhine had shattered Germany's last major natural defense, but had not erased the capacity for destruction. In cities like Kassel, Leipzig, and Magdeburg, German units, some regular Wehrmacht, others SS, others hastily assembled Volkssturm, fought bitterly to slow the Allied advance. Streets were blocked with rubble, bridges rigged with explosives, and sniper fire echoed from upper floors of ruined buildings. American infantrymen described the eerie contradiction of the moment. The war felt won, yet every hour still carried the risk of sudden death. Patton warned his commanders that victory was most dangerous when men believed inevitable, writing on April 2nd, "When confidence turns to carelessness, blood follows." George S. Patton's Third Army surged eastward with relentless speed, crossing not only rivers but psychological thresholds. After the Rhine, Patton no longer saw geography as an obstacle. He saw only time as the enemy. Armored columns drove day and night, bypassing strong points when possible, encircling resistance instead of confronting it head-on. In towns like Fulda and Gotha, German resistance collapsed almost instantly under the shock of speed and firepower. Prisoners poured in by the thousands, many openly relieved that the war was ending. Patton's orders were blunt and uncompromising. Keep moving. Don't let them think. Don't let them rest. His command style, once controversial, now appeared devastatingly effective against a disintegrating enemy. Meanwhile, the Ruhr Pocket in the north became the graveyard of German industrial and military power. Allied forces encircled more than 300,000 German troops under Field Marshal Walter Model, trapping them among shattered factories, burned-out rail yards, and bombed cities. The Rhine crossing had made this encirclement possible, cutting off retreat and resupply. Inside the pocket, chaos reigned. Ammunition ran low, communications failed, and discipline collapsed. German soldiers wrote farewell letters, burned documents, or simply walked away from their posts. Model, refusing surrender, took his own life on April 21st, a grim symbol of the final collapse of Nazi command authority. For Allied soldiers, the advance after the Rhine revealed horrors that reshaped their understanding of the war. As units overran towns and countryside, they encountered forced labor camps, death marches, and the first liberated concentration camps. Soldiers of the U.S. 4th Armored Division near Ohrdruf and later Buchenwald stood in stunned silence at what they found. Emaciated survivors, piles of corpses, evidence of systematic cruelty beyond comprehension. Patton himself visited Buchenwald on April 16th, writing afterward that he felt physically ill and furious, stating, "I do not believe this story. I know it." The Rhine crossing had not only opened Germany militarily, it had exposed the moral core of what the war had truly been about. As Allied forces pushed deeper, coordination between armies became increasingly shaped by political realities. Eisenhower made the strategic decision to halt Allied forces at the Elbe River, allowing Soviet forces advancing from the east to take Berlin. This decision frustrated commanders like Patton, who believed the Third Army could reach Berlin quickly. In private, Patton raged against what he saw as missed opportunity, writing on April 18th, "We are being stopped for political reasons while the enemy collapses before us." Yet the decision reflected broader Allied agreements and the looming shape of the post-war world, reminding commanders that war was never purely military. The human toll of the Rhine crossing and subsequent advance was written on the faces of soldiers who had been fighting continuously for months. Men slept in stolen beds, barns, or beside their tanks, their exhaustion only briefly relieved by the knowledge that home might finally be approaching. Combat fatigue was widespread, yet discipline held. Officers worked tirelessly to keep units cohesive, knowing that breakdowns now could still cost lives. Medics reported treating not only wounds but psychological collapse, men shaking uncontrollably, unable to move forward, crushed by what they had seen and done. German civilians experienced the aftermath of the Rhine crossing as a sudden and total inversion of reality. Nazi authority vanished almost overnight, replaced by Allied military government. Some civilians greeted Allied troops with cautious relief, others with fear, shaped by years of propaganda. Entire families wandered roads with carts and bundles, fleeing fighting or simply trying to survive. Allied soldiers, many hardened by combat, now faced the complexity of occupation, guarding prisoners, feeding civilians, maintaining order in a defeated land. The war had shifted from destruction to responsibility. The Rhine crossing also marked the definitive end of German operational maneuver. Without fuel, without air cover, without coherent command, remaining German units became isolated pockets of resistance rather than a functioning army. Allied intelligence noted that many German commanders deliberately avoided combat to spare their men. Captured officers admitted openly that the war was lost after the Rhine. One colonel reportedly told his American captors, "After that river, we knew there was no Germany left to defend, only ruins." Patton's reputation reached its peak in these final weeks. To his soldiers, he was the embodiment of relentless energy. To German commanders, a force of nature. To Allied leadership, both an asset and a liability. His ability to exploit the Rhine crossing and convert it into a lightning advance validated much of what he had preached since North Africa. Speed, aggression, and psychological dominance could collapse an enemy faster than brute force alone. Yet his outspoken views and refusal to temper his language foreshadowed the tensions that would follow the war. As April turned to May, resistance dwindled rapidly. Towns surrendered without a shot, white flags hanging from windows and church steeples. Allied columns advanced almost unhindered, their maps filling with captured objectives faster than planners could update them. Soldiers described the surreal feeling of driving through enemy territory without opposition, the quiet broken only by engines and distant artillery. The Rhine, once feared as an almost insurmountable barrier, now felt like a distant memory, its crossing already eclipsed by how far and how fast the armies had moved beyond it. The success of the Rhine crossings demonstrated the full evolution of Allied warfare. Early mistakes, painful defeats, and hard-earned lessons had forged an army capable of complex, multi-domain operations on a massive scale. Engineers, infantry, armor, air power, logistics, and intelligence had worked as a single system. Eisenhower later reflected that the Rhine operations represented the moment when Allied command truly functioned as a unified whole, rather than a coalition learning to cooperate. For many soldiers, the Rhine crossing remained the moment they realized the war would end in victory. Letters home written in late March and early April spoke of cautious hope, disbelief, and exhaustion. Yet even as the end approached, discipline and caution remained necessary. Mine snipers and desperate last stands continued to claim lives, reminding everyone that war rarely grants a clean ending. By the time Germany surrendered on May 7, 1945, the Rhine had become a symbol rather than a battlefield, a line that once represented German strength and now marked its undoing. The river that had protected the heart of the Reich for generations had been crossed, mastered, and rendered irrelevant by preparation, leadership, and sacrifice. For the men who crossed it under fire, it would remain etched in memory not as a geographical feature, but as the moment when the war decisively turned from survival to inevitable victory. In the end, the crossing of the Rhine was not a single act, but a convergence of courage, planning, speed, and human endurance. It revealed what modern armies could achieve when unified under clear leadership and shared purpose. It also exposed the cost, physical, moral, and psychological, paid by those who carried the war across that final great barrier. The Rhine did not simply fall. It yielded the accumulated weight of years of sacrifice, bringing the long road to Berlin and the war itself to its irreversible close.